Hello, hello. We are here recording our podcast, and we are welcoming you, especially if you are new and have been shared. This has been shared with you, right?
Yeah.
Hey guys. All right, I'm going to start us off with a fan shout out over on iTunes with the podcast, and it's from Lifesaver. She says, or he, I don't know, this podcast has been a lifesaver in my current time. I made discovery about a month ago. My partner and I are in a process of a therapeutic separation, moving towards a full disclosure. I have no idea if we will survive. This podcast is giving me so many tools in case I decide to stay. But even if I don't stay, I am gaining tools for my ongoing wellness and recovery. Really, truly so grateful. Thank you. I love this. I love that this girl or boy, whoever it is saying, no matter what, I'm here and I'm finding help, and that's the point.
I have a cousin who listens, and she doesn't have betrayal trauma or sex addiction in her marriage, and she was just saying, like, I love listening to your podcast anyways. It's still so good for our marriage, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, awesome. We're basically saying, don't do all the things we've done, right?
Right.
We'll tell you what not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So this episode today is actually designed to share it with family members, and we're going to give some guidance to loved ones about just how to handle the situation, how to give support, how to be there for people who are struggling with betrayal trauma and sex addiction. And we hear a lot of stories about how family members are really kind of detrimental to recovery and become problematic. And so we're going to outline for you what sex addiction and betrayal trauma are, so you know that. And Ashlynn and Coby are going to share a little bit of their story, so you can gain a better understanding of what it is, and then we're going to give you specific pointers and things that you can really do to be a good support. So do you guys want to start with just describing your story? And
right, I think this is good context, so that way for those of you who are listening for the first time and may not have seen or heard any other episode, you'll know who these people are. So my name's Coby. I'm married to Ashlynn. Say hi.
Hi. We've been married 18 and a half years.
And we've got 2 girls, 8 and 10, and I was first exposed to porn when I was 7, and really was in just an addictive mind frame and addictive behavioral pattern with porn and masturbation for 31 years. And there are varying levels of consumption of porn, but that led to an emotional affair in 2006 and a second affair in 2013, and then finally in 2014 I realized I have got to change this because I cross-lined. I didn't think that I was going to again, so we found specialized therapy and started a journey together. And I knew that Ashlynn, you had a lot of betrayal trauma. I didn't know it was called that, but
I just love how simple you're making it sound when really it was a giant mess.
Yeah.
And that's because we talk about it all the time, right? So here's our story in a nutshell. But for 14 years of our marriage, it was the topic that, if talked about, was a giant fight. We didn't share it with family. We didn't share it with friends. We shared it with a few ecclesiastical leaders who didn't, have a ton of knowledge to help us. So we were very uneducated, very isolated from our own doing. And when I started to see, and it actually came from a friend who shared on Facebook her own story, I realized I wasn't alone. And then there was this whole network of people who were, 1, helping, and 2, giving support, like support groups, right? I didn't know sex addiction was a thing. I knew that my husband struggled with porn. I knew that we felt disconnected. I didn't understand boundaries, any of those things. And so when we found help 4 years ago, depending on when you're listening to this, in 2014, that's when life changed for us. And it's been a long road that we continue on. Recovery is not like okay, we made it. It's this mountain we've climbed, and now we're done. And now we are healed, and we can just do everything. It really is this ongoing process of becoming the best version of us. And we've really enjoyed it, and have gone from telling no one and being super ashamed to being in a place where we wanted to share so we could help other people.
Yeah, so that's why we have this podcast now. We've teamed up with Brannon, who is the expert. He's a certified sex addiction therapist, and so the idea with this podcast is that we can share 3 different perspectives on various topics related to addiction. And our hope today is that for those of you who are friends or family members, loved ones of someone who either struggles with addiction or struggles with betrayal trauma, is that you'll be able to understand through our own experiences what your loved one or your friend has been experiencing to some degree. There's, we can't hit all variations of addiction and betrayal trauma and all degrees, but we can represent at least from a general level what this looks like.
Yeah, it's good. I think I'll give a little bit about me too. So why am I an expert? I've been trained as a certified sex addiction therapist, and the training was good, but really why I'm an expert is I've been treating addiction ever since I've been a therapist. It's been my thing. And I've specifically been treating betrayal trauma and sex addiction for like 8 years now. And I've done hours and hours of groups, individual therapy. It's what I do. Retreats, it's what I specialize in. So I do know it inside and out, and I know how to treat it. And so between the 3 of us, I think we have a good perspective of what works and what doesn't. We understand recovery. We understand what undermines recovery. And so for you, the loved ones, we just want to share a little bit of that with you so that you can support your family members who are struggling. So let's start by just breaking down things that are helpful, and then talk about things that aren't, and pitfalls that family members get caught up in. So from your guys' experience, maybe share a little bit of your story about that, or what was helpful for you, what hasn't been helpful for you.
Well, we said nothing to our family when we were in the thick of things. I just felt like something was wrong with me. So why would I share this thing that everyone would judge me for?
Which is probably the most common thing, is you might know that your family member's struggling with something, but they're just not opening up about it, and they're isolating in it. And so it's pretty awesome that you do know. I don't know how you found out, but you do know now. And so, but that's the first thing, Ashlynn, what you said is to just shut up, because it's a private thing, especially sex addiction, right? And you try to work it out in your own marriage.
Yeah. With betrayal, especially, I think I felt a lot of embarrassment because he wanted other people and he didn't want me, and so I didn't want to tell people that because I knew they would judge me. Things like, because I didn't tell my family, there was reasons I didn't tell, those were some of them, but also hearing things like, oh, if my husband ever cheated, I'd be out. If my husband ever looked at porn, I'd leave him.
So if your sister or somebody said that, you're not going to sit her down and say, hey, I want to tell you that I have this betrayal trauma thing going on, right?
Because they're going to be like, well, you should leave him, or we hate your husband, or we hate your wife.
Are you weak? Are you crazy? Are you stupid?
Yeah, right? And so when I would hear those things from friends or family, I get it. I used to say the same thing. I always thought, if my husband cheated, I'd be out. Right. And it's just not so black and white. Right. It's not.
So I think one of the first things to really look at as a family member is to understand that it's in context, and your family member, they have their own life experiences, and they're doing what they're doing because of that. And you can judge them, you can should on them, tell them what they should and shouldn't do, or you can take a step back and say, okay, hang on, why are they acting this way? How come Ashlynn is staying? Instead of just, well, she should leave him because he did that, right? Okay, where's Ashlynn now? Why is she staying? It's not always so black and white. So,
I'm trying to just put myself into the shoes of the people who are listening, and again, there might be people who are listening to this because their son or their daughter who is single struggles. It might be because they have a son or a daughter who is married and has a partner who is either the betrayed or the addicted. And I think contextually, one of the things that I want to describe is what my experience was in my family of origin, so that it can be very clear as to why this has been such a hard thing to share. Okay, so in my family, we didn't talk hard things in my family. That just wasn't a skill set that was modeled and discussed and talked about. And that's without any judgment. So if you're also in that family that like talks weather and talks like, you know, vacations and trips and so forth, but doesn't necessarily talk about hard things, this isn't a matter of like passing judgment on you, but it's simply just describing, because in my family we didn't talk about hard things, that meant that I didn't possess the skill set to say, hey, I'm in kind of over my head with my parents, for example, or I think I might have gotten to something that might not be in alignment with where I actually want to be. And because that relationship didn't exist for various reasons, my mom I was the second of 7 kids. My mom kept kids with special needs. She was just emotionally unavailable, right? There just wasn't enough time and attention to be able to spend to say, let's create a relationship that can be conducive for talking about hard things. So if that's your situation, it is what it is. We're not judging that, and we're also not going to keep, like, the hope is that from our perspective, we hope that that's not, because that's the cultural norm in your family. We hope that going forward, you can say, although that's where it was, we can change things going forward, and we can actually talk about hard things. And if you can keep this perspective in mind, that any acting out that your child or friend or sister or sibling has perpetrated.
What I hear you saying, Coby, and this is really important, I think, for family members to understand, is if you want to be a supportive person to them, you got to start with the foundation of a healthy relationship, which is built on safety and trust. So if you've sent a message out that, hey, we avoid hard topics, we don't talk about hard things, how safe are you going to be for them to talk openly with you, right? And so work on that trust and that safety before you go to them and you say, hey, I want to talk about your hardest things because I heard this podcast that says that we're supposed to like start talking about hard things. Well, get to know them on a level where you know who they are. You're their friend, you're their support, and then you can start to have those hard conversations.
That's really good.
Stop avoiding the hard, open up yourself. Talk about hard things in your life, and then all of a sudden you're a much safer person for them to open up to, right?
Absolutely. I think some of the best things for me when connecting with someone in a real way is when they're saying me too, in some way, or they're showing empathy. And
the
not
vulnerability
just saying,
is 2 ways.
oh, my life is so good. Like, I can't believe your husband would do that. You know,
Right.
those are awesome conversations because I'm like, we're done.
Right. Which leads to it's easy to be the fixer, where they come and they say, look, we're struggling with sex addiction, we're struggling, I'm struggling in my marriage, and it's easy to be like, well, I'm awesome, I'm good, so I'm going to tell you how you can be good, and I'm gonna fix it all for you.
Yeah.
And that's not connection. They need connection right where they're at. They need you to connect to their pain.
So mostly listening, really. I mean, it looks a lot like
To
listening.
to simplify it all down, Ashlynn, that's a great word.
I mean,
Listen.
if you imagine, if you're the friend, the sibling, or the parent of someone who's struggling with addiction, imagine that they're in a hospital bed and they're in a coma and they can't communicate with you, but you're being there and being by their side and not wavering is the only thing you can do, and you can leave the healing to the professionals, to the doctors and the nurses to care for their physical well-being, but you can just be an emotional support for them while they're there. That's really the equivalent of what is ideal for the person who's struggling with either betrayal or addiction, is they just simply need you to be by their side and to not try to fix it, but just know that your support is unwavering. And I also wanted to say this too, if you have if you have a kid, a sibling, or whatever who is struggling with addiction, they're looking at porn, or whatever the case is not a reflection of the kind of sibling that you were or the kind of parent that you were. That's their choice individually, and it's not a reflection on that. So if you can disassociate yourself from that thought that, oh man, I'm a
Not
bad
take it
parent,
personally.
exactly, then what that can do is facilitate connection to you and your child or your sibling, so that it becomes about what their issue is rather than the inadequacies or the shortcomings that you feel like you're responsible for or that you feel you have.
Yeah.
That's a super important part of this.
So, Brannon, can you give us, what is sex addiction? What does it look like?
Yeah. So if you go and listen to, I think it's our first episode ever, you can get a much more in-depth understanding of what sex addiction is. But I think for a family member who's listening to this right now, what would be helpful to know is that sex addiction is an attachment disorder. Sex addiction is when somebody has so much shame that they can't connect to people in a healthy way.
They can't attach.
And
They can't develop bonds.
They don't
in a
attach
healthy way.
through the normal way of trust and vulnerability and intimacy, honesty. And the sex addiction, what happens is somebody gets their connection in a fake way, in an unhealthy way. So they keep going back to this thing, masturbation, pornography, affairs, acting out with people, whatever it is, to get this need met for connection. But what happens is it's this perpetual cycle of shame, because then they feel like, well, now I'm disgusting, I'm perverted, I'm wrong, nobody will love me as I am, so therefore I need to kind of hide who I am. I don't want to let people in too close. And you know, as a loved one, if you're listening to me say this, you might be thinking, yeah, like it's been really, really hard to be a support to them because they've been so distant and they just haven't. It's just been so hard to break through their walls. Sex addicts oftentimes will show up really small, play small, because they don't want to be vulnerable in life. They believe they're failures. They believe they're not okay.
Meaning they won't show their cards. They keep their cards close to their chest, so they're not going to be open up and share things or share struggles or anything like that, because they want to give the appearance to everybody else around them
That
they're good to go.
they're okay. They don't want to fail.
Yeah.
That
was totally me, by the way.
Yeah.
That was totally me.
The other thing that you'll see is erratic, compulsive, volatile behavior and emotions, because they're not coping with their emotions in a healthy way. They're not going through them. They're not feeling them. They're using something to numb out and avoid feeling. And so you'll see some pretty crazy behaviors that will disconnect. So a lot of anger or a lot of sadness, depression,
Isolation.
No, but those emotions really spike high and low, and you'll just feel that depression from depression goes with sex addiction.
It was totally my experience. Like stressful times. Like just to be super clear, my consumption of porn was commensurate with my levels of stress that I experienced in my life from various ways. It might have been stress from academics, stress from dating, stress from friends, stress from sports.
I think that's important for a family member to understand is the sex addict is using the sex as a coping mechanism,
Yeah.
but they're actually using it not to cope. But as they use it as a coping mechanism, the rate and duration of its use increases over time, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. And that sex addict finds themselves doing things that they normally wouldn't do in their life, but they're doing it anyways because they're just pushing a further limit to get that rush, to get that escape, and then the disease progresses on from there.
And moreover, the disease progresses in a very specific biological way, in the sense that what I began to do, even as a young kid, was in my head when I was stressed or I was uncomfortable, and I didn't realize I was uncomfortable or stressed, right? When I felt discomfort of any kind, then my mind, as a young kid, even 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, would go to images that I've seen or replay in my head the experience of going to, the neighbors and finding porn. Exactly. And that was, I grew up I'm 41. I grew up in the 80s, right? I was born in 77. And so magazines were the only access that I had. And so I would begin to obsess about those things, or obsess might sound a little bit intense, but I would be fixated on those experiences and having access to those, because I was feeling discomfort of really any kind. And so what happens is in my head, the thought was, I'm in discomfort or I'm uncomfortable. This is how I deal with this discomfort. And I wouldn't label it that. But it's like if I had to do, for instance, as a kid, like in 4th grade, if I had to do like long division, we actually talked about this the other night, and I couldn't do it, I was so stressed, then my mind would go to thinking about what I saw.
Like lusting.
To escape the stress from doing long division as a 10-year-old.
Right.
And I think it's important to show that sex addiction can be so different, right? There's so many different levels.
Yes, that's important.
And so what you may think
there's a sliding
in your
scale.
Head, this is sex addiction. And I think the biggest reason Coby and I didn't look at his issues with the consumption of porn and masturbation and his unboundaried relationships with women, we didn't look at it as an addiction because it wasn't every day.
Right.
And so in my head, addiction is something that is like ruining your life on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was ruining our life.
Right. That's, he wasn't out sleeping with multiple prostitutes all the time.
Mm-hmm. But I wasn't staying out late every night, going to the bar, picking up women. That wasn't me. But mine was, no matter if it's me, if that's what I'm doing, or if it's on a daily basis, addiction lives in a cycle.
Yeah.
And mine was every couple of months, and it just persisted over the course of our 14 and a half years and got worse. Or like you said, it's a sliding scale. Yeah. And mine got worse and worse over time. And that's just, there's a cycle with every addict in their consumption.
I think for family members, one thing that's hard to understand is, if you've been in a relationship with an addict, that addict has probably done some things that it's been hard to be in a relationship with them. But treating this for as long as I have, I've never met a sex addict who's not a good person, and just a wonderful man. But the thing about him is he's caught up and he's stuck in so much shame and so much pain. And if you can see their addiction as that, and you don't see it as, they've done all these things, they've disconnected from you, and you take that personally, then you can be a better support. I know that's easy for me to say, and that's hard to grasp. But really, all this craziness, they've been trying to figure out how to find God and get love in their life. That's what they've been trying to do.
Find some validation.
Yeah.
I think of, because we've both had family members who've had drug addictions, and so we've lived with both sides, and it is hard to not take it personal and say, well, you're disconnecting from me, then I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna help you.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you're talking about is that shame and how the self-worth is just so low, right?
Mm-hmm.
I honestly did not expect that. When I knew mine was, I knew I had tons of shame and that I had very low self-worth and confidence because of the things Coby had chosen to do. So when he showed up saying, hey, me too, wait, what? But it makes sense.
Right, he was a good faker. He was a good poser.
Totally.
Hey, I'm Mr. I got it all figured out, right?
And he would deflect everything, so it was he was on top of the world. He was successful. He had all these friends.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loved him, and people thought I was a beast because I was showing up in front of people, sometimes in my betrayal trauma.
Yeah. So that leads to the next thing, which let's talk about betrayal trauma, because sex addicts are misunderstood. But wives of sex addicts are very
partners of
partners of sex addicts are very often misunderstood by family. Family sees the disconnect. Family sees the anger. Family sees the hey, we might get divorced, and they think, what's wrong with her? How come she's acting that way? How come she's so
Crazy.
So mean, crazy, awful? Sad, why doesn't she just get better?
Why doesn't she just get over it? Why doesn't she just forgive and forget and move on?
And honestly, I thought those things about myself.
You're already in that, right?
I already was in my head thinking, what is wrong with me? I would leave a room after being so angry or so mean and name calling and bringing up the past, leave the room and go, what did I just do? Who
Right.
am I?
So let's shed a little light on some of that behavior. Just so you understand, our greatest fear as human beings is disconnection. That's what shame is we're afraid that we're not good enough and people won't attach to us. And so when somebody gets betrayed, they experience trauma on many different levels. And you think, well, it's just, oh, he cheated on me, and ouch, that hurt when he did that thing. It's much more complex than that.
Yeah.
It makes you question who you are as a woman. It makes you question your reality. You feel like, why didn't I trust myself? How come I didn't trust my gut and my intuition? It makes you question your stability in life. Are we going to stay married? Will I have money? Will I be safe and stable? So it rocks you on so many different levels. Then all of a sudden you're supposed to show up at a family party for Thanksgiving and have a smile on your face.
Yeah, you got your mask on.
Yeah. And then your husband, might do this or that, and you're all of a sudden experiencing these trauma triggers, and they're crazy or not based in reality, but you're still feeling it. And that's okay that you're feeling that. So for a family member, it would be helpful if you backed off a little bit and allowed her to feel what she's feeling, and let her know that, look, it's okay that you're feeling fear, it's okay that you're feeling pain. I'm here for you, and if you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen.
I like that.
Just some context on this too. For those of you who have kids or siblings or friends who are the betrayed, there is this I don't know, the addict from my perspective, I didn't realize the depth of the pain that I was causing my partner, Ashlynn. I didn't understand, nor did I want to understand, and I tried hard to avoid understanding what the cost was. And I became, in order to save myself from really facing the reality of those things, which was really hard, then I began to blame Ashlynn and began to heap on her the responsibility of my looking at porn. And what's important that you understand is when I'm in that place, when I was in that place of blaming, I was totally hijacked in shame, which means I was in a place going like, oh my gosh, like I'm so horrible that I can't, she's never gonna forgive me, and I've crossed a line yet again, and I have to save face. So the way I'm gonna do that is by blaming this on my partner.
Yeah, make me look bad.
Totally, and that's not right. And I take full responsibility for the years that I did that, but that was just addict
But I
preservation.
think family members don't see that.
Yeah.
And so they don't understand the depth of that.
Coby's dead.
And, but they don't get.
They don't see me.
How much she's been manipulated.
Yes.
How much she's been gaslighted. How much she's wondered whether her reality is reality, because the addiction has been wanting her to do that to enable the addiction to keep it going and going. And so there's a reason why a partner of an addict feels crazy. And they're not just, a partner of an addict isn't just mean and shut down. They're confused and they've been traumatized. So.
Yeah, and it shows up in so many different ways. I mean, I don't even know the symptoms of betrayal trauma, but it shows up in your health, in your mental health, physical health, in your attitudes, all these things. So it's been different for all of us, I would say, but yet when we get together as women in these support groups, much of our feelings are the same.
Yeah.
And so we may have different symptoms, but we show up hurting. And so I think one thing is when people hear, my husband just looks at porn, and we start comparing pain and our story, or my husband just had an emotional affair, not a physical one, like you shouldn't hurt so bad, right?
Okay, yeah, so you
or
shouldn't hurt so bad.
At least it wasn't a physical affair, or at least they didn't fall in love.
So what you're saying, Ashlynn, is it's really not helpful to minimize the pain?
No.
No.
For the addict and betrayed.
It's
family.
invalidating.
Yeah.
Like, well, at least it was only this, or, it was like, why didn't you get over it? It's only that.
And I was told that with the first emotional affair, and I didn't know what an emotional affair was. But Coby had connected with someone else and commiserated about our marriage, and there was this attraction between them. And it was a secret relationship I didn't know about. When I found out about it, I was told, you know what, you need to just forgive and move on. And so I thought I had. Okay, I'm going to just do that and pray my feelings away. But I didn't get any help. I didn't know what I was feeling. And so years later, I'm thinking, why am I so mad at him? Why do I despise him? Why do I, all these crazy feelings? And that's why.
And then,
I never dealt with it.
And then when that was brought up, and it periodically would, I would totally manipulate you, Ashlynn.
Right.
And say, dude, we were told to move on from this. You're stuck on that. That's not fair. Like, I'm moving on, you need to move on too. So I didn't validate in any way, like you just said, Brannon, the pain that you felt. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to go there because that means I would have to take responsibility for my actions.
Right.
And I wanted to do nothing like that.
If you're a good support person, then you will not jump in the middle of the blame game when it comes to sex addiction, betrayal, trauma. The sex addict can make their wife out to look like a monster.
Totally.
And even get to the point of saying, well, if she weren't so mean, or if she were more available to have sex, or she were this, then I wouldn't have had to go do this thing. Right, Mom and Dad? See how mean she is? And Mom and Dad say, yeah, son,
that makes
like,
sense.
yeah, she's horrible, she's terrible. And vice versa. A good support family member does not jump in the blame game. They listen, they hear your pain, they understand why you're feeling what you're feeling, but they don't fuel and feed your victim stance.
Yeah. And I guess I want people to understand who are listening and maybe don't understand what this is. Think of yourself when you're physically having all these problems and you go to doctors and you don't know what the diagnosis is, and when you finally have a solution, that's what it was for us. When we finally were told, hey, there's this thing called betrayal trauma and you have it. Hey, there's this thing called sex addiction.
And
You've got it. Like, and guess what? That's not just it. You're not going to label yourself now. You now can get help because there's specialized help.
You can get healthy, you can move forward.
Yeah, for me it was very validating to say, okay, now we can do something.
Absolutely.
All the years of being mean and wondering why I was mean to Coby or why I felt so hurt was now legit a thing.
Right.
And that was a big turning point for us.
So Ashlynn, what's helpful is, like, if I were your family member, it'd be helpful for me to say, oh my gosh, tell me what you've gone through. That sounds really hard. I can hear your pain. I feel it. And once I've done that and I sit there in that space with you for a while, and let's say you go to, Coby sucks, I hate him, right, this, whatever you say.
Yeah, you have a bad day.
Right? Then I can say, I totally see why you feel that way. That makes sense. What's not helpful is in that moment if I say, yeah, he does.
Are you going to leave him?
So,
I got those a lot.
So because you just said what was validating is when you understood what you had and how you could move forward to get over that, right? It is validating for me to say, yeah, he's horrible. Because then you're like, yeah, you see my feelings, you get it. But if I keep fueling that, if I keep telling you how horrible he is, then I'm actually just keeping you stuck right there, right?
I think what's important to note too about betrayal trauma is that it has parallel symptoms to post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
And just like a war veteran who is home and on the 4th of July hears fireworks and all of a sudden they time travel back to combat and traumatic experiences that they felt. So their body's there, but their mind's totally not there.
You're dealing with somebody in their emotional mind, in their limbic system, their midbrain, that they're not rational at times, and it's totally normal and a response that's there to protect them to not be rational at times. I know that sounds crazy and out there, but because they've experienced this trauma, this betrayal trauma, they might go to a family party and act like a total crazy person, but for good reason they're acting that way, right? Because they're in trauma.
Yeah.
Anger, rage, depression, sadness, anxiety, overeating, undereating, lack of sleep, sleeping too much, all those things.
Yeah, it
Brannon,
shows
could they
up
not
in so many ways.
be symptoms of?
Okay, so we know what it is. We figured it out. Somebody sent you this podcast. So now what? How do I show up? We talked about listening. I remember when we told our families, I remember what everyone did, how they showed up. I can see it, I can feel it. And honestly, it was just the thank you for sharing something so personal, something that is so, like you said, shame-filled for most humans. We don't talk about those things. And then a hug. What I loved, and this kind of was more on Coby and I's responsibility, is we said, feel free to talk to us about us, check on us, see how we're doing. So we learned that if we just said, we told them this big thing, and then we all leave and go our merry way, they don't know what to say.
Right.
Like, they want to know how we're doing, but they're also like, I don't know how to bring this thing up because it's super awkward. And so we kind of took that off of them of saying, hey, you're welcome to ask us how Ashlynn's doing, how Coby's doing.
You made that easy for them. That was really good, because a lot of times that won't happen that way. Where it's like, let's tell you what's really going on in our marriage.
And see ya.
And then, that was awkward and weird, let's never talk about it ever again.
So if they don't tell you that you're welcome to ask, you can come back as a family or friend and say, tell me how I can be there for you.
Yes.
Right?
That's great.
So either way.
What do you want me to do? How can I best support you?
How can I show up?
Yeah.
That's really great.
I think of my friend who I actually wasn't very close to at all. But when disclosure day came for me, which is Coby telling me about his second affair, I remember I texted her, I couldn't call because I was crying, and I just said, I don't even remember what I said, but I was in this like panic mode, right? Like my world just crumbled. And I remember her saying, can I come? Can I come and just be with you? Let me take you, let me go, and I was like, no, I'm okay. Like, I don't even know what I would say to you. I'm okay. She came anyway. She drove 30 minutes and she came anyway.
So she was connected to you, she was reading the situation.
And all she did, she texted me and said, I'm in your driveway, come outside. So I left and I said, Coby, I'm going. We went and sat in her car for hours and I just cried and talked. She didn't try to fix it.
Right.
She didn't want to ask, she didn't say, tell me more. She really just listened. And I know that's why we have a close relationship, is because she showed up for me.
That's an awesome story. Yeah. And that's a real friend right there.
Her name is Tiffany Danzy.
She's awesome.
Okay, so listening and holding space and giving your energy and your time and saying, look, I want to be here. Maybe I won't do the exact right things for you right now, but I'm here and I care. There's with addicts, oftentimes parents are taught tough love. And I just want to talk about that for a second, of whether that's helpful or not. It's important for family members to have healthy boundaries and to model those healthy boundaries. What's your guys' understanding of tough love?
Tough love is you need to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. You need to take responsibility for this. You need to work your way out of this. And you know what? Let me know when you're there. Because then, yeah. No. It's like no.
Oh,
how I define it. Tough love is like, you know what? I'm going to disconnect from you until I know that you're in a good place.
Tough love is heavy on the boundary side of things, and it's I'm not going to enable you at all. I'm not going to make you comfortable so you can continue on with your addiction. I'm going to avoid making you comfortable so that you can face the harsh reality of what's happening in your life so that you can get motivated to get better. But I think it's important that you're boundaried, and it's important that you're honest with them, right? You're giving support, but you're also honest with them. And you don't want to enable
the undesired behavior. But it's tough love. There's still the love part to it, which is, like, here's my boundaries, and it's not tough to be a jerk, you know, like, here, let me just tell you why you suck and why I will not help or support you in any way. It's, here's my boundaries, and I love you so much. I care. I see you as a person with value, and I want to support you. That's awesome.
Right?
That's super awesome. And I would say the last thing on this too, on that note of loving them in a boundaried and tough way, is remember this too. This is for everybody who's listening. Until I was really, I don't know, probably about 2 years ago, I was really an emotional 7-year-old when it came to dealing with hard things in life, because I ran from them. And so my emotional development legit stopped as soon as I started learning to use porn to deal with hard things in life. And that meant that not only did I have to stop thinking in that particular neural pathway in that particular way, but I also had to acquire skills to learn to deploy. So it wasn't just a matter about not doing something that I didn't want to do, but it was learning how to, in a healthy way, deal with life. And so this is you're dealing with somebody who has really been emotionally stunted in very specific ways, and who is really going to have to work super hard to take responsibility, to be really focused, and to get the right kind of help. And I would say this too, for those who are family members or friends of the betrayed or the addicted, we spent a lot of time with general therapists and spun our wheels. The best way to help them to get help, just so you know, is they need to see a certified, like Brannon, a certified sex addiction therapist, and someone who also specializes in treating betrayal trauma. That's the best chance for success. That doesn't mean that everybody who has those credentials is actually going to be, like, from a relationship standpoint, the right fit for your friend, sibling.
And ultimately, I mean, if it's your child, this is different. But ultimately, that's not on you or up to you where they go for help. And if they're listening to our podcast and getting good information, then they're probably a few steps ahead of you as a loved one as to what's helpful in terms of therapy. But don't insert yourself too much and be too nosy about everything that they're doing with their help. Back off and trust them. It's different if it's your child, right? But back off and trust them and let them go through their own process of healing.
Okay, so I know that there's some listeners, like you said, who are steps ahead, and they're amazing people. I know that some of them are paying for other people's recovery, because so many people cannot pay and afford to go to therapy. So would you say that's a way to show up as a friend or a family member? I want to help you. They have the resources and tools, but 1 month they're having a hard time and struggling.
I would not pay for someone's recovery if they're not internally motivated.
Totally.
But if they're already doing.
If they're already internally motivated, then I'll shell it out all day long. I would pay for any family member's therapy. If they're working toward getting healthy themselves. Why I say it that way is I see it a lot of times where mom or dad or spouse wants it worse than the person who's struggling, and so they pay for it all and they want it to get fixed, and they're just wasting their money. So don't waste your money on somebody who's not internally motivated, but by all means support them if they are.
For sure. Anytime you invest in yourself, you're a lot more committed, right?
Yes.
You got to stay in the game. Yeah. You're invested. You're going to take it more seriously.
Okay. One way you can also show up as a friend or family is by offering to babysit. Hey, they need to go to group, something like that. Hey, you need to take a nap. You need to have some self-care.
Just basic support.
Let's go out as girlfriends. Let's go out as, that's part of recovery, is having joy in your life.
Go have fun with them.
That's also for the addict, because
awesome.
a lot of times the addict is horrible at having a hobby, taking care of themselves. You know what I mean? So having time to spend to fill their cup and to find renewal, super, super important. That can come in various ways. Yeah. And I would say the last thing on this is keep in mind that if you let go of the idea of your addicted friend, sibling, child needs to be perfect, the more you can let go of that idea and embrace the idea that they just need to make progress, the easier it's going to be for you to be a support for them if you let go of the idea that they need to be perfect in order to get over this, because that's just simply not how it's going to be.
Yeah.
But if you see that they're making progress and you focus on that and see how they're progressing across the board in many different ways, then it'll be easy for you to support them in the way they need. Okay, thanks for being here. Honestly, if you've heard this and you've seen value in it, we'd love you to share this with people. You can share this in a text message, you can share this in an email, you can share this over a direct message or over a Facebook message. And the idea with this is really giving a peek behind the curtain for loved ones who have, you know, people who struggle with betrayal or struggle with
another thing too is
addiction.
On our Patreon. So we have a site, we have a community where people can interact with us, ask questions, get extra content. If you're a loved one and you want to ask us some questions, that's a great place to go.
Totally.
You could sign up. You can sign up for $10 a month. You can cancel it whenever you want. So you could sign up. You can hop on there, ask us some questions. We'd love to get questions from family members. That'd be awesome.
For sure. If you scroll down in this in the podcast app and click on episode notes, you'll see the first link there is the link to our Patreon site.
And hey, I just want to give a shout out. If you've listened this long, it's one of our longer podcasts.
Totally.
Pat on the back, because that means you're showing up. So thank you.
Totally.
Big deal. Thanks for being here, guys.
All right, see you guys.